Well, good afternoon. We are going to start this session, the last session of today. That's a pretty long day, but this doesn't make it more interesting because we'll be discussing about new governance frameworks for smart cities. Now, smart cities has been a very nice label that we have been using about a kind of a modern way of using technology to cities. But as people is getting deeper and deeper into this concept, one is discovering that the key element is governance. What we are going to do with this technology, because it's not the city that is smart, is the governance of the city, is the people in the city, and the way that we can empower these people for a better economic, social success, and the way that we do this thing. And for this, we have a very interesting panels because everybody here but me is in one or another option in the government, so they are practicing this thing. By the way, I'm a professor at the IESE Business School, a strategy professor, but very interested in the aspects of governance of cities, of what has been called this smart governance. Okay, but without further delay, let me just very fast introduce the panelists that we have so that you can appreciate the diversity of perspectives that we are going to be using and taking advantage in trying to understand the common elements that we can learn in terms of this new and emerging frameworks of governance. So we will have, in the order that we will be talking, from Israel, Edi Ben Hazavdi, sorry if I don't pronounce it well, which is Director of Energy Conservation and Smart Cities Department in the Ministry of Infrastructure, Energy and Water, and that he will be explaining the situation in Israel and how the cities there are evolving towards this concept of smart cities. Then we'll have from China, Wang Yanjing. She is the vice chairman of something that translated is the Internet of Things application branch in the China Communication Industry Association, and the initiator of the first Civil Smart City Alliance in China. Now, from Israel and China, we will go to Ireland, to Dublin. We will have Oisín Quinn, which is the Lord Mayor of the city of Dublin. So we'll move from kind of more regional perspective and their influence into the city to really, I hope, the experience of interesting cities like Dublin. And last but not least, we'll have Carlos Negreira Souto, which is the mayor of the city of Coruña, and which of course he will be explaining to us through, by the way, his long experience in different positions, but I guess he will center mostly in the experience of Coruña. And by the way, for you to be prepared, his talk will be in Spanish. You all have simultaneous translation if that's needed. And without more further ado, so we don't have much time, Eddie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first use this opportunity to thank the Smart City Expo organizers, the FIRA Barcelona Directorate, and the City of Barcelona for having such an important event. I hope that this event will continue for the next and the next and the next year. I have no doubt that smart cities will be the next generation issue. This is my second time here in Barcelona for this event. I'd like to talk to you about the Israeli situation and try to figure with you how can we do things. Some idea about Israel. Land, it is 20,700 square kilometer. Population 8 million. About 6 million of them lives in the city, and the rest live in small towns. In Israel, 90% of the population lives in towns and cities. Less than 10% live in a village, small villages, very little of them. Less than 3% are agrarian, doing agriculture and stuff like this. Most of the populations live along a narrow strip of land along the coastline. Most of them, 65% of the population, lives in less than 13.5% of the land, just because the rest is mostly desert. However, we live in the desert as well. The density of population in Tel Aviv stands at 7,523, and the cities in Israel are still developing. We have higher education, 33 students per every 1,000 capita, 1,000 people in Israel. Transportation, motorization level, about 345 vehicles per 1,000 people, about 19,000 kilometers of road, about 145 vehicles per kilometer of road. In Tel Aviv, which is the most densest place and the surrounding city, the motorization level is stand at between 400 to 640. Economical and energy data. GDP per capita, 33,000 US dollar. It was in 2012. Primary energy supply is about 23 million TOE. Total of CO2 emission, 67.2 million ton. Electricity consumption, it is 53 gigawatt. Prediction of the total annual electricity consumption by 2020 is 80 gigawatt, unless we keep doing energy efficiency as we do today, and it should be around 60 gigawatt and not 80 gigawatt. And we are doing a lot of energy efficiency in Israel. Primary energy per capita is 3.1 TOE, and it is not increasing for the last 10 years. Our GDP is growing, and the final consumption of electricity is the primary energy in TOE is not increasing. However, the end using of energy is increasing. This is because we enter natural gas technology. Electricity per capita stands at about 6,800 kilowatt hours, about 80% of the energy consumed in the city in Israel. R&D is about 4% of our national GDP, and it is only for civilian matters. 54% from the Israeli export is high-tech. Background. With the expansions of the needs for services and the rise of standard of living, it becomes more and more difficult to supply modern services to a modern society. The State of Israel meets this challenge through the establishment of smart city administration. It is believed that smart city cannot survive out of context. There is not one city smart and the other city dumb or something like that. So we believe that the city and the surrounding and the small villages around the city, all the complex should be smart, if we're talking about smart here. So the government decided to take the lead. We adapt smart city concept, however, we prefer to use the term sustainable human habitat. We want to focus on human. City is not for itself. Cities are for the people who lives there. We believe that if the city cannot supply what the people need, so as smart as it would be fault. It would be not beneficial. In Israel's case, this approach offers an holistic solution by taking under account a wide range of interconnected issues. Challenge: scarce land, energy, and water resource. Until recently, energy and water were two big issues in Israel. 97% of our energy was imported, and water we used to pray to God. Sometimes he listened, and sometimes he didn't. At the moment, since we found natural gas, we don't have any more shortage with water. We desalinate seawater. So we solve those two problems. However, they are still in a status of scarce. Immigrants absorbing country. We are absorbing immigrants from different countries, sometimes from Russia with well education, very technological, and sometimes from Africa, from Ethiopia and other countries, that we have to bring them to lift them up to a modern society. We have all the infrastructure, high standard of living, unstable geographical neighborhood. I think we are kind of an island in the Middle East. Israel is a kind of energy and other resources island. Opportunities: high level of education with high percentage of internet, computers, and smartphone users. In Israel, we have about 2 smartphones per capita. How? I don't know. I need 1, but I usually have 2. Israelis are multilingual. As you know, we have our own language, Hebrew, and we have to learn English from elementary school, and then we have our mother tongue. So basically, you would find Israelis with 3 languages, at least. High-tech economy, specializing in software communication and in internet technology. Israel is known for optimizing the uses of water. As I said, 80% of the total used water is recycled. And we use that water for irrigation, for agriculture. It is expected that by 2015, 100% of the drinkable water will be desalinated. And after it's used, it is recycled. The Israeli government role. Okay, just this slide. The Israeli government role, supplying modern services to an ever-growing population with the growing living standard, addressing local and global growing expectation for sustainable economy with lower use of energy and sequences greenhouse gas emission, enhancing the use of internet and communication technology in transportation, water supply, sewage treatment, energy production, energy consumption, and other basic public services, contributing to public health and cleaner environment in every aspect. I have more. If you give me another 5 minutes, I'll finish. If no, I'll sit.
To share the time, so we will have time later on
Excellent.
in the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yanjing, the floor is yours.
各位来宾，大家好。很高兴在这样一个宜人的季节，再次来到巴塞罗那这座美丽的城市。我仅代表中国通信工业协会对本次博览会的召开表示祝贺。因为时间关系啊，我的这个内容实际上要讲半个小时到1个小时的，时间比较紧，压缩到10分钟。这样的话，我只能讲一个框架，以免不影响下边的演讲人的时间哈。下面我开始我的这个汇报。我今天汇报的这个主题是中国智慧城市建设市场分析与产业展望。中国智慧城市建设呢，主要分为3个阶段。第一个阶段是数字城市阶段，它的这个阶段可以分为这个数字城市阶段主要分为3个阶段。第一个是起步阶段，2000年到2003年由这个建设部与科技部2大部委发起实施建设。第二个阶段是试点阶段，由2004年到2007年，全国共建成51座这个示范试点城市。第3个这个阶段是推广阶段，2008年以后，全国已建或在建的这个第一个数字城市阶段有100个这样的城市。然后第2个阶段是智能城市阶段，智能城市阶段的牵头单位为中国工程院，这个属于学术的范围。该这个项目一共有13个课题，在此我也不展开了，因为时间关系。第3个阶段，也就是现阶段，智慧城市阶段，住房和城乡建设部截止目前公布了200座智慧城市的示范试点城市。同时，2013年的3月11号，国家发展和改革委会同工业和信息化部起草促进我国智慧城市健康有序发展的指导意见。我汇报的主要的内容分为5个部分。第一个部分是中国智慧城市建设规划与现状及分析，中国智慧城市建设市场驱动因素与产业构成，中国智慧城市建设部分典型项目介绍，中国智慧城市建设市场本土厂商运营情况，以及关于我们协会在智慧城市领域的探索和思考。下面我说这个第一个部分，首先是智慧城市现状及分析。目前中国提出智慧城市建设的城市已经达到200多座，预计“十二五”期间计划投资规模超过2万亿元，其中国家扶持资金将达到4400亿元以上。下面我说一下这个中国智慧城市建设市场驱动因素与产业链构成。首先说一下这个左半部分的中国智慧城市建设主要分类，有第一类是创新推进智慧城市建设，这类城市将建设智慧城市作为提高城市创新能力和综合竞争实力的重要途径。比如深圳，它将建设智慧深圳作为推进建设国家创新型城市的突破口。第二是以发展智慧产业为核心，宁波将以建设6大智慧产业基地为重点，加快推进智慧产业发展。3是以发展智慧管理和智慧服务为重点，佛山市为了打造智慧佛山，提出了建设智慧服务基础设施10大重点工程。4是以发展智慧技术和智慧基础设施为路径，这个我就不展开了，比方说杭州这座城市。5是以发展智慧人文和智慧生活为目标。 右边这部分我讲的是中国智慧城市建设市场驱动因素，主要有3个因素。第一是信息化需求是智慧城市的基石，城市管理者希望消除数字化鸿沟，进行智能管理，极大地推动了无线城市的建设。市民作为城市的主体，随着信息技术的发展和工作效率的快速提高，对数字化生活的高效率工作有了更高的要求。第二是比较主要的一点，是政策引导是智慧城市发展的推动力。2013年2月初，国务院发布关于促进物联网有序健康发展的指导意见，住房和城乡建设部分2批公布了200多座智慧城市试点城市。2013年3月11日，我刚才说过的，国家发展和改革委会同工业和信息化部起草了促进我国智慧城市健康有序发展的指导意见。国家在政策层面加快建设宽带、泛载、融合、安全的信息网络基础设施，推动新一代移动通讯、下一代互联网核心设备和智能终端的研发及产业化，加快推进3网融合，促进物联网、云计算的研发和示范应用。第3点是新一代信息技术的创新应用为驱动环境，国内物联网、云计算以及第3、第4代移动通讯产业的快速发展，为国内智慧城市建设发展提供技术应用的市场环境。下面我说一下关于我们通讯工业协会对中国智慧城市全产业链构成的一个理解。当然，智慧城市不同人从不同的角度有不同的认识，我认为各方的认识都是有道理的。但是我们协会通过近年来与政府企业的沟通交流，我们总结，我们认为的智慧城市应该是超越信息化的概念，是城市化、工业化和信息化的深度融合。另外呢，由于我们协会作为一个行业平台，基本上接触了中国智慧城市这个产业链上的所有领域，我们总结所谓的智慧城市全产业链构成主要分为6个部分。这个因为时间关系我全部都不展开。首先是智慧产业，然后是第2部分是技术体系，第3部分是智慧政务，第4是城建实施，第5就是智慧民生，第6是资金规划。就这个智慧城市全产业链构成，如果在座的各位有兴趣的话，我们可以私下里再交流，因为这个东西很多，没办法一一展开。下面我介绍一下这个中国智慧城市建设部分项目介绍。这个项目也比较多，我也只能介绍一下这个项目的分类，主要分为6类。第1是智慧社会管理，第2是面向企业的公共服务平台建设，3是智慧安居服务，4是智慧教育文化服务，5是智慧健康保障体系建设，6是智能交通建设。下面简单介绍一下中国智慧城市建设的本土厂商运营情况。时间比较紧啊，我争取说快一点。第1是中国移动通讯，它拥有庞大的手机客户规模、丰富的信息化运营经验和国家对 TD 网络的大力支持，发展无线城市有很大的优势。作为除政府资助、公共分享之外的无线城市建设的运营商，中国移动正在大力的加快建设步伐。2是中国联通，它的3G 网络所运用的 WCDMA 技术是目前全球普及率最广、产业链最成熟、技术最先进的3G 制式的通讯网络，而且其高效率以及高普及率保证了智慧城市建设，拥有先进的信息应用技术。3是中国电信，它响应国家“12+5”规划，凭借其全球最大的固定网络、丰富的城市光纤、宽带和运营商中唯一拥有卫星通讯能力等优势，与政府共同规划智慧城市建设，以示范工程切入，带动智慧城市行业应用。4是华为，因为我们这次华为也参展了，可能他们企业的负责人也有相关的演讲，这个我也就不展开。5是大唐电信科技产业集团，它是国务院国有资产监督管理委员会管理的一家专门从事电子信息系统设备开发、生产和销售的大型高科技中央企业，总资产规模近500亿元人民币，总部设在北京，在上海、天津、成都、西安、重庆、深圳等主要经济发展的城市都设有生产与研发基地。 第6是中国同方公司，这个我也就不展开了。下面说一下我们自己，就是我们中国通信工业协会。围绕着我们协会有3大平台，第一就是我们中国通信工业协会物联网应用分会，我们有权威的专家和顶级的优秀的会员，有高端的系列组织活动、项目及资本对接，我们在中国物联网业界的影响也是有目共睹。第2就是我们中国智慧城市规划推进联盟，第3就是我们现在已经在筹备运营的中国智慧城市研究院，它致力于智慧城市创新解决方案的研究。下面简单的说一下我们中国通信工业协会智慧城市综合服务体系架构，这个内容也比较多，我只能把这个框架介绍一下。第一部分是咨询，然后是规划，然后是实施，下一个是资金、产业、评价。这是我们所理解的这个智慧城市综合服务体系的一个构架。当然我们一直也没有停止过我们对智慧城市领域的探索和思考。时间已经到了。因为我的内容真的是很丰富也很多，我们行业协会在中国基本接触了我们中国智慧城市建设的所有领域，我们在这方面的探索和思考也比较多，我今天不一一展开。我希望在座的各位如果对中国的智慧城市建设有兴趣，可以给我发电子邮件跟我交流。好，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Yanjing. Oisín, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joan. It's a pleasure to be in Barcelona and in Catalonia. I should say that Dublin is a sister city of Barcelona. So we're always delighted to be here. As the Mayor of Dublin, I'm delighted to be in Barcelona, one of our sister cities, and your Deputy Mayor, Jaime Coruña, has been very hospitable to me today, and we had visitors from Barcelona over in Dublin last week when we dedicated a 300-year-old olive tree in commemoration of the 300th anniversary of the 1714 siege. So it's particularly nice to be in Barcelona. I should also say I'm delighted to share a stage with Yanjing Wang from Beijing. Dublin is also a sister city of Beijing, so that's also fortuitous. And as I'm speaking in English, the translator who translates things into English can get a break in advance of the next speaker. So I'm sure our translating department are delighted with that. But I had a very interesting visit to Beijing in September. And I should say, Guaojin Suji, the secretary who was the mayor of Beijing when we twinned, was very, very receptive to us. And it is great to be able to collaborate. And that's certainly one of the things I think smart cities have to do, is to collaborate. So from my point of view, I've been the mayor of Dublin since June. I'm not really a technology person. I'm a lawyer by training. And I'm the 344th Lord Mayor of Dublin. So there's a lot of history to the mayoralty. And the mayoralty goes back to 1229. And the city is more than 1,000 years old. So I probably have the perspective of someone who is not intuitively comfortable with technology, but I'm very conscious about the opportunity it does create for cities, particularly because of what we're trying to do in Dublin, which is to position Dublin as a leading gateway for international investment into Europe. And we have a lot of the big internet and new technology and social media companies in Dublin. Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Huawei from China are there as well, and very many others, and they're all growing, and they like being in Dublin, which is fantastic. But the city has to change to even keep pace with the changes other cities are undergoing, and there's no doubt that that involves availing of technology to let people shape the way the city grows. So I'm delighted to get the chance to share some of the things we're doing, and some of them are already slightly out of date, and we're going to have to upgrade them, and to give you a sense of what we need to do if we're to meet the challenge of a modern city. I think taking on Richard Florida's speech, the keynote address there, the challenge of making these great livable cities and clusters of the future, which is a very exciting gauntlet to have thrown down. So I've sort of three things that have come to me in the last few months of being the Mayor of Dublin. One, you can no longer expect citizens to adapt to their city. Cities must start adapting to citizens. The second one is cities, though, have a responsibility to provide good infrastructure for everybody living in the city. And thirdly, the people leading cities must embrace technology and not fear it, even though by doing that you don't know the outcome of where you'll go, which is something intuitively people in politics don't like doing. We like to already have the answer before we consult. I shouldn't really confess that, but that's probably the case. So going back to the first one, that cities must learn to adapt to their citizens, there's three sort of examples of what we're doing in Dublin. One is a permanent online survey we have with 4,000 Dubliners who we interact with on a regular basis about every issue that we think is relevant to the city. It's called Your Dublin, Your Voice. So these people are people who voluntarily signed up, and we send them out electronically questions and detailed questions about issues we're grappling with, and we want to get their feedback. And then if we like and we feel confident about the answers, we move on implementing things. If we're not sure, we might widen the public debate, but we'll often use the surveys with the more mainstream media to spread the message and to get confidence behind decision makers as to what needs to be done. A quick example, I'm trying to lead a campaign to switch from the one-year mayoralties we have to a 5-year executive mayor, and we used Your Dublin, Your Voice to get a survey result of 61% of the population in favour, and that ran then on the mainstream media and has helped get the government on board to hold a vote next May as to whether Dubliners want a directly elected 5-year mayor. Another example is open data. Open data is key, and we have a thing called Dublin, so we put all our traffic, water, air data just out there. So people can then design apps, and people can use that to find routes into work. They can put in where they're going and avoid roadworks and things like that. They can find out about water if they're into triathlon or swimming, and they need to know if they're going to be able to organise a swim we're on the sea, in the water, and so on. And they can advise people about that. The air as well is another factor. I suppose we have pollen readings for people who want to go jogging, and they might have issues about where they want to jog. A third example is the thing we're doing called City Watch. Now we're piloting this. So City Watch is really using the residents of Dublin as human sensors. So we have some electronic sensors in our lampposts which will measure things, but then we ask people to sign up to this and just to let us access their data about what they're saying and what they're doing. So it's a little bit like the way private companies will use software to monitor social media to see how people are reacting to their products, and they will either fight back on Twitter or Facebook, whatever it is, or else use the response that they're getting from tens of thousands or sometimes more to react. We want to do the same with the people in the city, to let us use their data and monitor what they're doing saying on Twitter, so we can see, are people unhappy with the way a road junction works? Do people not like the way we've pedestrianised a street? So we can get instantaneous feedback. It will be much more interactive than the Your Dublin, Your Voice, which is electronic and it's good, but it's perhaps a little old school. So that's three examples of how we want the city to learn from the citizens and the city to adapt to the people in the city. So the second challenge, I think, for cities is to provide a good infrastructure for all. And this isn't really being too prescriptive about the outcomes, but it's about that, sharing the value of doing something that everyone can benefit from, rather than having like everybody build a road or everybody build train tracks. You put down one good one and then let people do what they want on it. So examples of that, we have launched this year a free public Wi-Fi scheme in public places, actually with a Spanish company, GAUX. So GAUX is our partner on that because we have a very tight budget with the overall financial situation. We got in a private company to work with us. And the free Wi-Fi, it's good for Dubliners, but very good for tourists who want to use location apps to find out what restaurants have deals or what cultural activities are on. And we're trying to grow that. We have it in 12 public spaces. It's free, so everyone can use it, and we're pushing it out across the city. We also have a digital master plan to upgrade the city in the future, and we want to put in 100 megabyte broadband for everybody, both upload and download, to enable everybody to get the benefit of being able to use the internet fast in their home. And the third one is about providing education and support both to people and businesses, and making this available to all. So we are piloting an initiative called Activating Dublin. So 3 of the big companies in our city are Facebook, Google and PayPal. And we've asked Facebook, Google and PayPal to come together as a trio. They compete a bit. Well, Facebook and Google compete a bit for advertising, but to work together to provide specific solutions to small businesses. So you can have a shop selling ladies' gloves, but you could be selling them to anywhere in the world. But a lot of people, their online presence is not great. It's flat, it's a website, maybe with an email address. So we want to make the logistics work. We want to make people really have a fantastic interactive internet presence for their businesses. But for small business people whose maybe love is of the business they're doing, they don't necessarily have all the skills for this, so we want to get the big companies to provide this sort of support. And also for individuals, we want to upskill our individuals with the latest coding skills so that we have a great startup economy. So activating Dublin is one. The Dublin storefront is another initiative we have. We're going to create a brand of Dublin, and small businesses can arrive and get set up with a top world-class internet presence, where they can keep a Dublin feel to their business, but have it all working logistically, sharing logistics, sharing online payment systems, and all of that, so they can concentrate on the core business they love. And the third thing is getting the clusters to cluster together. We actually have quite a few incubator zones and clusters in the city, and some of them compete with each other, and we're trying to get them to collaborate and maybe get them to physically proximate as well, a bit like Richard Florida was saying, the more times you have people together, both collaborating and competing, the richer the experience. So we're trying as a city to provide that top quality infrastructure without necessarily defining the outcomes, but then giving people the opportunity to surf the wave, so to speak. So we have the digital master plan to help with that, and then a digital maturity framework where we're going to measure how effective it is so we can keep an eye on it. And then the third thing is that I think as people in leadership positions, we have to embrace the technology and not be afraid of it. And it's very much the case, I think, that this technology is very, very positive for all of us. I know sometimes people with kids, when, like me, you grew up and you didn't have all this, and then you're bringing up kids who do, you kind of worry that they spend too much time on their iPads and on Facebook and everything. But in actual fact, it's a little bit like when the telephone came in. The research showed that most telephone contact was between people who physically met. And the same is happening with things like Facebook and the social media. People are interacting more with people that they want to have a real relationship with. So it enhances interaction. And I think that's absolutely vital. So the sharing is good. And taking Richard Florida's point, when you put people together, like in 2000 BC in Greece, you had Socrates, Plato, Aristotle coming out, New York after World War II. All of these things, you put people together, it does lead to great creativity. And social media can really, really help that. As a politician, though, the fear is when you put questions and issues out there, and if you genuinely let people debate the issue, you have to be prepared not to know the answer and to let the answer emerge. So it's almost like a new process of designing solutions, rather than saying, this is what we want to do, this is what I said I'd do when I get elected, and I'm going to stick with this no matter what. You say, I have values, and I identify problems, but I will work with everyone to come up with the solutions. And that's where new technology can enable that much more, sharing the value of all the creative energy that's in the city to come up with the solutions. So ultimately, then it does mean, though, if you do that and you are prepared to embrace a process that doesn't have an end outcome, to make it have integrity, you have to have strong values, respecting people's privacy, respecting diversity, and respecting equality, letting everybody have the same role and voice in the solution and in the conversation. So I think if you do all that, you have a good chance of sticking to the goal of making the city a great place to live. So 18 seconds to go. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much, Carlos.
A todos, querido Joan, gracias por darme paso en esta intervención. Gracias a la FIRA, segundo año que acudimos la ciudad de La Coruña, y este segundo año pues con un proyecto un poco más modelado, ¿no? Yo en primer lugar quiero decir que llevamos 2 años de gobierno municipal en la ciudad de La Coruña. Somos un equipo de gente joven, un equipo de gente que ha trabajado pues en múltiples servicios públicos, en la empresa privada, en muy diversos sitios, y que cuando llegamos nos planteamos una cuestión sencilla. Si es que una ciudad como la nuestra, de 250.000 habitantes, podía o no tener un buen futuro, podía o no ofrecer oportunidades a sus ciudadanos, y en una sociedad tan complicada creímos que lo más oportuno era precisamente iniciar un proceso de reflexión, de meditación, no solo el gobierno, sino de la mano con los ciudadanos, y de ahí nace un proyecto que se llama Coruña Futura, un proyecto que lo que pretende ser es un espacio para la estrategia, para la reflexión, para pensar en lo que viene más allá, distinto a lo que hacemos todos los días, que es estar en la solución urgente, en el semáforo, en la calle, en la luz, en la manifestación ciudadana o en una demanda de una determinada pensión, ¿no? Y por tanto este espacio que quisimos compartir con los ciudadanos nos dio unas claves que nos decían básicamente lo que teníamos en la ciudad y lo que creían que iba a ser el futuro. Ahí tuvimos un diagnóstico subjetivo de lo que pensaban las entidades, de lo que pensaba la sociedad, que estamos acompañando de un diagnóstico, digamos, técnico o más objetivo para ver por dónde tenemos que ir el futuro, porque el futuro no te lo dan, sino que el futuro lo tienes que conquistar. Una ciudad como la nuestra, que tiene un faro romano, el más antiguo en funcionamiento, 2000 años funcionando, o que tiene pues, elementos modernos culturales, como es un Picasso, donde este año se ha declarado de interés del Gobierno de España excepcional la primera exposición de Picasso, que se hace en la ciudad de La Coruña hace 120 años. Por tanto, tenemos elementos culturales que nos unen con Barcelona, con Picasso, con Málaga, con París. Tenemos elementos de historia de pasado de los que nos tenemos que enorgullecer, pero claro, lo que nos preguntamos es si tenemos futuro. Desde luego, viendo lo que han hecho algunas de nuestras empresas, creíamos que la distancia hoy no importa, estar en el lugar más occidental de Europa no importa. Tenemos un ejemplo como es el caso de Inditex, que además al venir hoy a Barcelona he tenido ocasión de ver la tienda de Zara Home, la número 400, que se va a abrir aquí precisamente en la ciudad de Barcelona el día 5, hoy por la mañana antes de venir a la fira, y por tanto creíamos que había modelos y ejemplos para seguir, ¿no? Y bueno, uno de los proyectos que salió es precisamente este de Smart Cities. Un poco casi al principio pedimos una ayuda a nivel del Estado, a nivel de Europa, se nos dio pues casi 11 millones de euros para desarrollar esta idea y es en la que estamos ahora metidos, ¿no?, de lleno. Una idea que pretende responder básicamente a tres cosas. Una, creemos que la gestión de lo público, de un ayuntamiento, de un municipio, puede ser diferente y tiene que ser diferente en el siglo XXI. No vale tomar ya decisiones solo desde una perspectiva, sino que tenemos que tener una visión integral cuando tomamos una decisión. Y por eso creímos que más que plantear un modelo de movilidad, un modelo de jardines, un modelo de una solución de un semáforo al turismo, a los servicios sociales, planteamos crear una plataforma integral de gestión para un gobierno municipal. Una plataforma que de alguna forma va a recoger todos los distintos datos que aporta cada departamento y, por tanto, tener una visión global, holística, si se me permite, de todo lo que es el propio ayuntamiento. De forma que cuando tú vayas a tomar una decisión, no solo tienes los datos de medio ambiente, sino que tienes los datos de movilidad, los datos de comercio, cualquier dato que pasa en la ciudad, pero no un dato cualquiera, sino un dato, digamos, útil, pensado para tomar decisiones. Porque puedes tener millones de datos y no saber qué decisión tomar, porque si esa información no está preparada, clasificada para tomar decisiones, es probablemente mucho más inútil que si tienes esa información perfectamente clasificada y perfectamente ordenada. Por tanto, un paradigma de gestión nuevo que creemos que hay que meter en este siglo XXI y eso hay que construirlo partiendo de la idea de tener esa plataforma que pueda agrupar todo lo que pasa en la ciudad desde todos los sectores. Y esto es lo que estamos ahora en proceso de construcción y les puedo afirmar, sin riesgo a equivocarme, que en España hoy esta primera plataforma integral de gestión municipal es la que hemos licitado en su momento, sacado a concurso internacional público y ahora están desarrollando un grupo de empresas en nuestra ciudad. Por tanto, primera reflexión, creemos que hay que tener una visión integral, holística, general de toda la ciudad. Y segundo, lo que creíamos es que el ciudadano no puede estar al margen de esto. Nosotros creemos que el ágora griega, donde antes éramos capaces de hablar y de estar juntos, las nuevas tecnologías nos van a permitir crear esta ágora del siglo XXI que consiste básicamente en la interconectividad que vamos a tener todos los ciudadanos con las posibles decisiones municipales. Tener al ciudadano y yo me gusta decir una frase, que el mejor asesor de un alcalde es su vecino, y os lo puedo asegurar que estar conectados con los vecinos tiene a veces algún inconveniente, pero tiene muchas, desde luego, virtudes. El ciudadano tiene que estar plenamente integrado en esa plataforma para que sea una antena, digamos, andante en el conjunto de la ciudad para ideas, para propuestas, para cualquier tema o solución. Y tercero, creíamos que esto nos tiene que servir para generar nuevo conocimiento y para generar que nuestros emprendedores, nuestros empresarios tengan oportunidades de negocio. Toda esta plataforma de información, no solo de datos, sino de información clasificada, posible, puede permitir que operadores empresariales, pueden permitir que emprendedores generen nuevos modelos de negocio, que es sin duda una fuente importante también para el futuro y por tanto no lo queríamos perder. Por eso también la universidad está muy metida en este proyecto. Os puedo asegurar, tenemos allí 4 o 5 universidades importantes, diría yo, para lo que son las soluciones urbanas, que son desde la Facultad de Ingeniería de Caminos, Canales o Puertos, la Facultad de Ingeniería Informática, la Facultad de Obras Públicas, Arquitectura, en fin, toda una serie de universidades y de personas que pueden ayudarnos mucho en esta evolución, porque las soluciones urbanas, sin duda, ahí va a estar un campo importante de bienestar, porque ahí va a haber empleo. Y, por tanto, si ahí va a haber empleo, va a haber oportunidades de los ciudadanos y vamos a originar, digamos, futuro para nuestros ciudadanos. Y la verdad que hoy, un concepto que mencionaba en una conferencia que estuve antes, Ricart, Florida, hablaba de calidad, ¿no?, del lugar. Y yo creo que eso también es importante. Cuidar el pasado, cuidar nuestra naturaleza, la Coruña verde y azul que nos gusta hablar, y por tanto hoy Coruña es patrimonio de la humanidad, en el caso de la Torre de Hércules, pero también su comarca es patrimonio de la biosfera mundial, y por tanto eso es un valor importante para generar un espacio para vivir, un espacio inclusivo y un espacio donde estamos procurando que, por ejemplo, temas de accesibilidad no sean un problema. Es probablemente uno de los programas importantes que hoy tenemos en España, el plan de ascensores, cuando nos dimos cuenta que casi un 40% de la población no tiene ascensor en nuestra ciudad, algo que pasa en muchísimas ciudades, y un plan de ascensores que es para nosotros fundamental para que las personas no estén en cárceles, casi viviendo, o el programa que es palmo a palmo en tu ciudad, que lo hacemos con las asociaciones que tienen problemas de movilidad, problemas de diversidad funcional, donde hacemos cientos de obras simplemente para quitar pequeños obstáculos en la ciudad, ¿no? Por tanto, el bienestar es sin duda una apuesta importante para nosotros, y ahora estamos en la fase de que, y vuelvo a retomar lo anterior, estamos desarrollando esa plataforma, como os decía, horizontal, donde va a caber toda la visión de la ciudad, pero al mismo tiempo vamos a sacar 15 proyectos concretos sobre servicios sociales, sobre movilidad, sobre, por ejemplo, gestión de eventos culturales. 15 eventos hasta el 31 de diciembre de este próximo año. Han salido ahora 3, 2 de ellos, uno es el de 4, perdón, el de red semafórica. Ha salido el de gestión de eventos culturales, deportivos, está saliendo, bueno, está también el de riego inteligente, todo el sistema de riego de la ciudad, porque cuando llueve no es necesario regar, y esto que es una evidencia, pues lo estamos ahora implementando, o todo el tema de eficiencia energética, que nos parece un tema apasionante, toda la energía. Nosotros tenemos muchos temas en materia de agua, pero tenemos un puerto energético que ahora se está acabando de construir con casi 700 millones de euros de inversión que se están ejecutando, con 200 millones de euros de inversión para estos próximos 3 años solo en movimientos de refinería, y por tanto la energía va a ser también un concepto clave. 15 proyectos que van a poner precisamente a decirnos que esa plataforma es viable, y a partir de ahí iremos construyendo muchos otros. Lo que quiero transmitirles de verdad es que tenemos ilusión por compartir todas nuestras experiencias. Todo este proyecto nos ha llevado, y acabo ya, a tener una diplomacia urbana diferente a la que teníamos, a ser una sociedad abierta y a intentar relacionarnos en Europa, en América y en cualquier lugar del mundo donde podamos aprender. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Well, I mean, I know, and by the way, I should appreciate the getting into the time and the concision that I needed to ask to each one of you. I know you have many more things to explain. I think we have seen two very contrasting kind of governance frameworks. The first two presentations, we've seen a more top-down kind of framework, if we can generalize, push for different needs of course, the situation in Israel and China are very different, but it seems to be much more top-down, while in the cases of Dublin and Coruña, we are seeing something that emerges more from the citizens. I call it more bottom-up, more participative, providing the infrastructure for entrepreneurship to emerge with respect to that situation. But with this, I would like just to at least use the 5-7 minutes that we have for open questions and hearing from you before we give the word again to the panelists. I think we have a question here.
I have a question for the Vice President of the Association of Beijing, that which part of the sector of industry smart city of China will be open to the international companies?
这是有的。现在国内的国际上这个顶尖的 IT 企业在中国应该都是设有公司的，并且据我了解，国际一线的 IT 企业都有这个物联网和智慧城市事业部，并且已经在承接中国的相关智慧城市建设方面的工作和这个建设这个项目，这个是毫无疑问的，因为中国现在是一个非常开放的国家。
Do we have other questions or comments? Yes, please.
我从刚刚的论坛上听到，就是说，在中国的这个投入上，智慧城市建设的投入上，还有这个规划和发展上，这个应该是从世界这个角度来讲，这个中国在智慧城市的建设是走在世界的前面。那么这个机会呢，我觉得可能对世界，也应该是一个非常好的一个消息。那么现在我想问一下，就是汪彦新会长，接下来你们物联网工业协会物联网峰会在国际方面的这个事务是准备怎么展开？那么在国际这个方面，就各个公司，他们会通过什么方式，最快的方式能参与到中国智慧城市建设？好，谢谢。
是这样的，因为我们协会实际上是一个平台，能够帮助国外的大型的企业进入中国来参与智慧城市建设。因为我们协会作为这个平台，基本接触上了这个智慧城市这个领域全产业链的，包括厂商、政府、行业机构等等的。我相信我们有一些很好的方案，或者是很好的这个消息，能够带给国际上的这些大型的IT 公司，或者说智慧城市建设的这些企业。如果我们在座的有些企业有兴趣了解中国智慧城市建设的这个进程以及相关政策，这个我们协会都可以提供很好的咨询，因为我们协会本身就是中国工信部的直属的一级社团，它本身在政策领域就有参与制定和上传下达这样的职能，这个是毫无疑问的。我当然也非常欢迎国际上的大公司能够到中国去了解中国，看看中国智慧城市建设的步伐。实际上我们真的是跟世界上一点都不落后，因为我连着3年来到巴塞罗那，我也看到巴塞罗那的智慧城市建设，包括这些参展商等等的，我也有体会，我们的步伐一点都不落后。我希望大家能够关注 中国，能够进入中国。谢谢。谢谢。
I would like to ask a question general for the panel. I mean, it looks like China is creating a lot of interest, and we can understand that's a big project, a lot of money involved. But given the topic of this panel, I would like to ask you about the barriers and difficulties that you are finding in transforming these cities, no? Because, technology is one part, and I think that's not the problem anymore. So what really are the barriers in the transformation of the cities that, each one of you were explaining, Coruña, in Dublin, in Israel, in China. What are the difficulties? What are the barriers? Who wants to start? Do you want to start from Dublin? Yeah.
Thank you, Joan. Yes, I think there's a few. One is that it's not clear that everyone has been able to participate in the same way. So there are groups and communities who I have some sense of a feeling are not necessarily getting the benefit, in Dublin anyway, of all of the investment and jobs that have come from Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all of that. So that's one. The other challenge for us is the bigger companies are arriving and they're offering jobs, and we're trying to make sure we don't almost smother our own indigenous startup industry. So we want to make sure there is enough room for startups to take chances and people to take risks, and encourage a culture where I think you see a little bit in America, but maybe less in Europe, where people shouldn't be afraid to have a business that just doesn't succeed, and maybe they try again, and that they're supported by the city and by their community, and it's not seen as a badge of difficulty, and that would be a sort of a cultural shift. And the third one probably is just hard infrastructure like broadband and stuff like that, which just sometimes when you're trying to push that out takes time and money that we don't have an awful lot of either.
Thank you. Eddie?
Well, lots of barriers and obstacles. First of all, central government leaves little space for local authorities. Second, regulatory barriers, old infrastructure, socioeconomical barriers, cultural barriers. In my country there are people that some of them cooperate, some of them are not cooperate, people that come from different backgrounds, and it is very difficult sometimes to convince them. Insufficient coordination between various data sources, national limitation due to security reasons, central supply of electricity and water. Smart city has to produce the energy and the water for itself. As I believe that wherever the energy consumed, it has to be generated. And unfortunately, nowadays in Israel, we have a central electric company and central water company, and they supply whatever they want and how much want with the price they want. And in a smart city, it has to be all, as I said, on the house. City itself has to supply everything with cheap and more efficient for the benefits of all its people.
Okay, thank you, Yanjing.
我是这样认为的，我认为在这个智慧城市建设方面，其实大城市和小城市没有很大的区别，因为互联网它是没有界限的，因为整个的这个智慧城市建设还是基于互联网和这个物联网这样一个基础之上。我认为这两大技术它是没有地域限制的，并且中国在智慧城市建设这个领域，其实很多中小城市反而起步非常好，因为它规模小，所以它好转型。像北京这样的大城市，它的基础设施已经很好，但是它在做智慧城市建设当中，它的困难反而会更多。像我刚才说到的佛山这样的小城市，因为它小，所以它更便于建设，甚至它以前的这个数字城市的这个基础设施不好，它是空白，但是白纸好写字儿啊，就因为它是空白，所以它更能够在现在这个智慧城市建设阶段，能够推动它的项目上马，甚至项目实施等等的。所以我认为小城市，就像刚才这位先生，小城市反而其实更有优势，我是这样认为的。所以我认为城市大小不是智慧城市建设的一个障碍，这个没有障碍。对。 谢谢。
Thank you, Carlos.
Bueno, yo por no añadir nada distinto, ¿no?, a lo que han dicho, yo creo que valoro positivamente lo que han dicho y comparto mucho de ello. Quizás uno de los temas que no hemos tocado mucho, porque hemos hablado de Open Data, de datos, de personas, y que hoy comentábamos al mediodía, es todo el tema de la protección de datos, ¿no? Yo creo que es un tema también que va a dar algunos dolores de cabeza en toda la puesta a disposición de ciudadanos y de empresas. Todos los datos pues nos dará algún dolor de cabeza en el futuro, y probablemente sea uno de los temas a sumar a las barreras que aquí estamos hablando.
Muy bien, bueno, yo creo que vamos a dejarlo aquí. Ha sido un día muy largo. Me gustaría que me acompañarais en agradecer al panel pues, con todas las ideas e insights que nos han transmitido. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much. Sorry, I switched panel.